Hey gang, we are in the midst of the cicada attack on Chicago. I'm not sure if you can hear that. I've got a special microphone on that is kind of a wind mic and drowns other noises out, but this is so loud and I'm gonna probably have to stay away from the bigger trees. There's two broods that just hatched this summer. Heard about the cicadas. This is nuts. I almost have to put earplugs in. I don't know if it's what the mic is going to do, but so we're here today at All Saints Cemetery in Des Plaines. We're just northwest of O'Hare Airport. And there is the son of an infamous criminal from the gangster days that is buried here that really no one knows about or talks about. But with Deb, we did a lot of research. Thanks, Deb. And we found a lot of information about him. And I guess kind of like father, like son, as it turns out, not quite nearly as bad. Didn't end up on Alcatraz or in Leavenworth. And I'm talking about Creepy Karpis, Alvin Creepy Karpis. His son is Ray. There's a big connection and stuff that we're going to talk about. Alvin Creepy Karpis, if you don't know, was public enemy #1 for a while. He ran with the Barkers, Ma Barker, the Barker brothers, the Brood, Karpis Barker gang. Of course, he ended up in Alcatraz with one of the Barker sons, Arthur Duck Barker, who, by the way, tried to entice Alvin Creepy Karpis to go with him, and I think it was Hubbard and Bernard Coy. It's a whole nother story, but they tried, this was one of the breakouts, and this was the worst one. They called it the Battle of Alcatraz. Oh man, they ended up cornered like rats in a chase wall all the way in. Oh, horrible. But Alvin Creepy Karpis survived Alcatraz. He was the longest serving prisoner there. Yeah, he was with the Birdman. He was with Capone. He was with all of those guys. And he's pretty much a legend. So his son, Ray, went by the name Ray Creepy Karpis, I guess. He had a son too, Damon, who died before he died. We don't know anything about him. Deb, we couldn't find anything. But yeah, that's the story. We're here, and what I thought I would do is I read the book. There was oh man, these things are crazy. They're all around me. I don't know if you see them flying. But I read the book. I got the book called On the Rock. It was the autobiography by Alvin Creepy Karpis. Really interesting reading about his times on Alcatraz. I've been to Alcatraz twice. I think the first time 25 years ago and then maybe 15 years ago. Highly recommend. It's probably one of the coolest history creepy places. You can go to the cell where Al Capone's cell, the bay, and there's so many stories on Alcatraz. But if you read his book, it's really interesting. Now, I'm not going to tell you the whole book, but I thought what I would do is I took a couple of stories out of the book that really hit me, and not the stuff that you've heard. I mean, there's one. Oh man, he screamed right in my ear. Not the usual, Morris and the Anglin brothers with the masks and the hair, and they snuck out. Although Alvin Creepy Karpis helped them, and we'll talk about that. But he was there when all of that happened, all of those stories. So reading the book, I pulled out a few things that I thought were interesting, particularly interesting. So enough on me. What I'm going to do is turn the camera around and we can look at some stones and a lot of cicadas. And I will tell you a little bit more about what I heard, what I read in this book. It's otherwise a beautiful day here at the cemetery. So what's interesting is Alvin Karpis was caught and arrested in New Orleans on May 2nd, 1936. I think that's what he said. It might have been May 3rd. Don't quote me on that. But it was the G-man, of course, of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover. And J. Edgar Hoover wanted to make a real impression and wanted to personally arrest him. Of course, as the story goes down, J. Edgar Hoover was kind of a wimp. And I'm sure people will argue that, but the way Alvin Creepy Karpis puts it, he was a real coward. Now, of course, a guy like that has a lot of disdain for law enforcement and J. Edgar Hoover. You've got to take it with a grain of salt. But quoting from the book, after Karpis was in cuffs and everything was settled down, he said, "I noticed someone peeping around the corner of the building. My hesitation causes the others to follow my stare, and when we are all gazing at the half-hidden form, several agents began shouting at it. 'It's okay. Come on, Chief. We got him. You can come out now.' And with this encouragement, the figure moves from its secure position and starts towards us. In his left hand, he has a .45 automatic. Its companion is in the hand of a second man who hurries along a step behind the first, walking in his shadow. I make the first man immediately. It's J. Edgar Hoover, director of the FBI, and the second man, slight and blonde, is Clyde Tolson. He is never too far from J. Edgar Hoover. The pair are often referred to as the Gold Dust Twins, after a pair of colored kids, and again, quote unquote, from his book, colored kids who are pictured on a cleaning powder. Racially, pretty pathetic times. So January 26th, Karpis, and I'm out of the book now, I'm just telling you, Karpis ends up at Leavenworth. It's in Kansas. He's prisoner number 49368. And it is there that he actually first meets a very strange man in the cell across from him. You've heard of Robert Stroud, the Birdman. Well, that's where he had the birds, the canaries. He had already been in isolation there for some 20 years. By August of that same year, Karpis is moved to the infamous Alcatraz, San Francisco, as so many of the others of America's worst criminals. And the book highlights many interesting experiences I mentioned. So again, I'm going to go back to the things that I thought were interesting. Now, I've got two stories that I'm going to share with you that really, as I said, stood out to me. But before I do that, I was reading in the book, and I really was kind of taken aback by, and when I went there, the size of the cells are so small. And I've been to other old prisons, and this Alcatraz, I mean, it was like a telephone booth. So I'm going to describe to you from the book on what his experience was just with the cell. He said it's 8 feet by 5.5 feet wide, 8-foot ceiling, on which is mounted a 20-watt light bulb. 18 inches from the ceiling, a shelf of 1-inch plank, 1 foot wide. That sits against the back wall. On the shelf, I find the following items, standard issue: a safety razor, an aluminum cup for drinking water, a second cup with a cake of Williams shaving soap in it, a shaving brush, a mirror made of highly polished metal, a toothbrush, a container full of tooth powder, a bar of Playmate soap, a comb, a pair of nail clippers, a sack of stud smoking tobacco, get this, a corncob pipe, and a roll of toilet paper, a can of brown shoe polish. You have to wonder, why shoe polish, right? A green celluloid eye shade. Lucky these things don't bite. One's on my neck, hold on. A whisk broom for sweeping out the cell, and the rule book we were told to read. So the rule book of the prison. Tuesday, August 11th, 1936, Capone is not in the yard. When I ask about him, I'm told he prefers to remain in the shower room, where he practices tenor banjo at noon and on the weekends. Down there, he can hold private conversations with his friends and associates without interference. So let me share with you the two stories that I found were really intriguing. December 16th, 1937. As I enter the clothing factory, I know this is the day. Ralph Rowe and Ted Cole are going to attempt to make their escape. They're going to take the plunge. They're going to take the plunge in the bay. And once they reach the mainland, they plan to steal a car and head for Texas, and then South America via Mexico. But on this date, suddenly, the Sacramento River, which empties into San Pablo Bay, just below Vallejo, floods. It floods as its tributaries overflow due to the recent heavy rains. It's the worst in years. As the tide goes out past Alcatraz Island, it is stained a muddy brown, and floating past us are barns, parts of houses, cadavers of horses and cows, and even a few dead people drift by with debris hanging all over them. They're all heading between the two segments of the incomplete Golden Gate Bridge. And off they go out to the open sea, lost across the horizon. Well, Ralph and Ted decide to hitch a ride with the swift outgoing tides on this first foggy afternoon. They made their decision and they are going for it. So Karpis and another inmate named Clark, Jim Clark, they are there watching. They're pressing their noses against the window, watching these two guys make their escape. So I'm going to go back to the book, quoting from the book. As we watch, Frank and Ted pop out of the window from the floor beneath us. They have a wrench and they break off the padlock of the fence gate. Now there is nothing to stop them but the rock and water below. Both are in work clothes and bare feet, and each of them has a shiv, handmade from files. This is to aid them in hijacking transportation once they reach the mainland. Now, interestingly, they each carry a square 5-gallon gas can with the handle strapped on them and the tops welded shut like life buoys, and they're attached to their hands. The two quickly make their way to the water's edge. Access is difficult because there's rubber tires that circle the shores of the rock, and underneath the water all around the island are rolls of barbed wire to prevent these escapes. But they both move cautiously, and they get beyond the barbed wire and they reach the open water. And basically, what happens is these two guys watch from the window, looking down, and they see these two get just pulled out. And remember, they're in the water, the freezing water, and they've got strapped to each hand these giant 5-gallon containers for floats. And there they go. And he says, there they go into the fog towards the bridge, swirling with all the other debris, and they just disappear. Now, what he didn't tell, because of course for weeks and months they're searching for these guys and they can't find them. And they think, wow, maybe they escaped. But what Creepy Karpis, the other guy, they didn't tell anybody. They just told their closest friends that, no, they saw more. These poor guys did not escape. It gets really creepy. Actually, when they saw them get down to the water, he said, and I'm going to go back to the book. As Jim and I stood at the window watching, Ralph and Ted picked up speed. They had just passed the buoy, which was straining on its side from the strong current, when, less than 500 yards from shore, Ralph disappeared as if someone grabbed him from under the water. The 5-gallon cans he had been clutching jumped high out of the water like corks from a champagne bottle, and they sailed off on the swirling surface of the dark water. Jim Clark and I looked at one another in shocked silence and back again to the bay, just in time to see the strong undertow pulled into its cold arms as he disappeared beneath the surface. His homemade water wings spurted forward, released of its weight. The shroud of white fog pulled itself respectively over the spot where we last saw the faces of Ralph and Ted. They were both gone. Yeah, that's not a story you hear. You hear the other stories, but that one really, I just could imagine them. The sight of being swirling, and you've got these 5-gallon, you know how hard that is? You pull it underwater and just ripped off their hands. Or it could have been thresher sharks. Or I don't know what kind of sharks, but I know there's sharks in there. They could have got taken by a shark. Anyway, after that, they never found them. So you have to wonder about Morris and the Anglin brothers. I don't think they made it. There were a couple of guys that made it, but they were so tired, and out by the bridge on shore, they were just taken into custody right away. Now, the second story involves a same-sex relationship. Now, these were common in the prisons, and I'm not going to get into same-sex, and I'm not going to tell any stories about what happened and all that, but I did find this one story interesting because of a revenge factor by one of the heterosexual prisoners. Well, maybe not. But a lot of these guys, so there was this one prisoner that was a Latin young man who came in, and they called him the China Doll. He would offer his services to certain people, a lot of people. And again, trade was big in prison. Everything was cigarettes. If you want to go take a shower without getting molested, 2 packs of cigarettes. If you want to eat with nobody stealing your food or spitting in it or doing something, 1 pack of cigarettes. Everything was like the bartering system was cigarettes. So the China Towel, this is 1944, and he talks about this inmate, Ed Reyes, the lovely Mexican kid, he called. Everyone called him the China Doll. Quoting from the book, Now, in Springfield, they were allowed to wear lipstick, nylon stockings, and to perform drag shows, all under the auspices of the psychiatrists and staff. One of the young arrivals stands out above the others, and he knows it. Paul Davis, a fellow kitchen worker working with me, knew him in Leavenworth when the kid was only about 18 or 19. And that was before he was sent to Springfield, the Springfield experiment. That's China Doll. I've been hot for her since the first time I saw her in the big top. That's what he said. But China Doll walked past Davis, deliberately ignoring him, and comes to sit beside Alvin Karpis, as he says, came to sit beside me at the helps table. His first question is to me, when can we get together? Paul Davis is watching all this, and he is incensed. He's watching and lurking, and finally he gets his chance to go after Karpis. Jealousy. So back to quoting from the book, Karpis says, I'm in the basement, I'm washing up. As the coat of soap rises down my face and I blink the water droplets off, Paul Davis comes into focus. Standing directly in front of me, a homemade shiv extends from his closed fist. And he starts out by saying, you son of a bitch. And I interrupted him, thinking fast. I said, are you crazy? What's wrong? Do you think I'm having a romance with that kid? And Davis says, the guys say I should kill you over this. And Karpis says, hey, even if I was romancing with the kid, it's got nothing to do with you or me personally. It's his decision, not yours or mine. And a few minutes of conversation, and Davis hands me the shiv, asking if I'll just dispose of it for him. Now that's just a little snapshot of how life was on the rock. In 1969, supported by recommendations from the former prisoner guards and officials, Alvin Creepy Karpis was finally paroled. And since he was not a United States citizen, he was deported to Canada. And that's where he went. Back in Montreal, he proceeded to lead the life of an infamous but reformed man. He granted interviews, gave lectures, he appeared on television programs. He wrote this autobiography, and he even appeared in beer commercials. Why would he appear in beer commercials? Because it was Mr. Ham in 1933 of Ham Brewing, who him and the Barker gang, they had kidnapped and ransomed successfully. 1973, he relocated to Spain. Initial reports that his 1979 death was a suicide were prompted by the discovery of sleeping pills at the scene. However, the Spanish coroner's report stated that the cause of death was heart failure. Alvin Karpis was 71 years old. So let's talk about the sun. Now, Alvin Karpis, Creepy Karpis, was married for a short time, but the son came illegitimately from a woman named Delaney. And she was his girlfriend, and actually it was Ma Barker that introduced Delaney to Alvin Karpis, and they had a love affair, and she became pregnant. And that's how that all started. Dolores Delaney. They never got married. I think because they were so busy committing crimes and escaping, but he had to finally abandon her on their last escapade as he machine gunned his way out of the Danmore rooming house in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And Dolores bore his child, whose son, his only son, Ray, we're going to walk to his grave. What's interesting is they said that when they told Dolores that the baby was a boy, she shouted out, "Gee, I'm tickled to death. I wish Al could see him, but I don't know where Al is, and if I found him, it would only mean Al's arrest. But my baby positively will never, ever go to prison, never inside a jail, no matter what happens to me." Oh, how she was wrong. So the young man, 25 at the time, had quite a rap sheet. And I'm going to tell you a couple things. I'm going to tell you the thing I found was hilarious is that I found an article talking about all his burglaries and bail being increased and all the trouble he was in. And it talks about his burglaries. And he would keep, I thought this was a cicada. I've had about 10 or 20 on my neck. You were probably freaked out watching that one. I didn't even know it was there. They don't bite, they're okay, but it is, ugh. But anyway, I shouldn't be standing in the trees, but that's all right. I like the shade. Oh, let's get out in the sun. Change my mind. I don't want these. This is where they're mostly in the trees coming down. And it's luckily, I remember last time in Chicago living here wearing red. Oh my God, it's like, and I just got lucky. I didn't plan this, but I'm wearing black and I think it's helping me a lot. But anyway, where was I? So we're talking about his rap sheet, and the guy kept, this is Ray Karpis, the son, he kept notes on all his burglaries and the names and the addresses. So, you know, they got that and they knew everything that he had done. And I think what's funny is they were known, you know, the neighbors knew the Karpises, you know, he had a wife, I think her name was Nancy. And they were dog lovers. They had a poodle. They were poodle fanciers. But what's funny is one of the robberies that he did, the family poodle was stolen. And the family was, the parent, you know, they're heartbroken. And the police, you know, they're trying to, like, give the poodle back. I mean, these people are really hard. Yeah, that's their baby. You know how we get attached to the pets. And what does he say? Ray goes, "I don't know anything about the poodle. You know, I didn't do that. But if you let me out, if you let me go, I'll help look for it." When I heard that, I was like, I just started laughing out loud, I have to tell you. So you got to give him credit. You have to give him credit. But, you know, he had a hot temper. And if you go look at the book, you will see that he did go to visit his dad in not, it was after he got out of Alcatraz. And let me just tell you that one part. When Karpis got off Alcatraz, he had to thread and get processed back through Leavenworth before he was paroled. And his son and his new bride, I think he was 22 or 23, Ray, whose grave we're going to, went to visit him. It was a surprise visit. And of course, Alvin was totally in shock that he came. He's like, but he was happy. And he said when his son first came in and he saw him, he knew immediately that was his son. And they met eyes. He goes, "Oh my gosh, he is a replica of me, like the way he looks." So they're trying to have this conversation. You know, it's family, first time, never met, whatever. And they got the guard hovering. The guard's a real jerk. And he's hovering like 2 feet away, like, and they're complaining at the guard, like, "Look at this guy. Are you kidding me?" And the guard says, "You know, are you gonna visit and get caught up, or are you just gonna complain?" So that really pissed them off. So Alvin settled, his son was about to explode, so he settled him. He said, come back tomorrow, I'll see what I can figure out. So the son, I guess the son was hassled on the way out by the warden. He had asked him, you know, what did you talk to your father about? Did you talk about any crimes? And Ray, whose grave we're going to, right, the son, he's like, why don't you go ask the asshole screw, I'm quoting, who listened in on everything. So anyway, to wrap it up, the kid comes back with his wife the next day, and the same kind of thing happens, except this time, the warden really entices him into what they called a row, like a fight. And sure enough, you know, the young kid just got totally riled up. There you go, guys. This is what things are flying all over the place. Who's grossed out by big bugs? I think they're kind of cool. They don't bother me, except when they get on my neck. I don't like that. Something cringy about that. Anyway, so let's go to his grave. I haven't been there yet. It is shown by the Archdiocese on GPS exactly where it is. There's no picture of the gravestone, so it's just yonder at the newer part of the cemetery. So I'll meet you over there. Okay, we are in the newer section now, and I'm going to walk to where his grave is, right over here. Ray died in 2001, October 10th. He was 66 years old. Getting back to the story, that last row, that last fight he had, he was banned. He could never come back to see his dad. Now, I don't know if they got together after his father was finally released, but take a look at his grave here. Now, watching my GPS, and it's right, and the map I have is this row right here. And let's look at the names. Nettie Millwood, Hayo Nava. It's supposed to be, you know what? Nope. All different names, and there's one open. This is where he's supposed to be, right here. And there's no stone. So I am guessing that he is unmarked. And that, I guess, is not surprising, because if you've got a Creepy Karpis or Ray Karpis, that is going to attract some attention. So Raymond was born October 24th, 1934 in Philadelphia, and died, as I said, October 10th, 2001 at 66. Yeah, section 39, block 8, lot 7, and this is grave 4, I believe. Someone check me if I'm wrong. But this is Alvin Karpis' only son right here. Wow. Well, I guess, you know, you look at Alvin Karpis and like Al Capone, and going all the way back to Billy the Kid and Doc Holliday was more of a good guy, but if you look at all the bad guys, Billy the Kid, and, you know, they're legends now, and I think that Alvin Creepy Karpis has kind of turned into kind of a legendary figure, but he was a really bad guy. He would kill, shoot the Barkers, really, really bad. Not a good role model, so you can see Ray here was led down the path. His father was just reading between the lines of the book, and that part of the book where it does talk about the visit to his father. His dad was his hero, and he wanted to be like his dad. I don't think he wanted to be a legend, But that was his role model. That was his dad. So not a good role model. But I'm guessing that from lack of bad news on Ray as he got older, he probably straightened out pretty good and led. He lived to 66, so he led unless someone knows different, I'm going to say he led the straight and narrow. So thanks for coming with, guys, and rest in peace to Ray and Nancy. I don't know where Nancy is. We can try and find her. Someone might know, but I think Ray is here all by himself in between Pedro and Nettie. Rest in peace, Ray Karpis. Rest in peace.